What up? What up? Welcome back to History Valley and MythVision, ladies and gentlemen. I am hanging out with Jacob Berman. What's up, man?
Oh, I'm doing good, Derek. How about you?
Good, good. Hanging out on a Saturday. I was just watching the new Netflix show, The Dinosaurs, and that's so well, just beautiful and captivating. And then I said, okay, let's get to work here. We got to talk about an ancient god that I don't think many people know about. I haven't had
Right.
any scholars on my show that have addressed this god and its potential significance. And you're going to make a case today that I think will be pretty interesting. Before we get into your material, if you're watching from MythVision, just so you know, History Valley is Jacob's YouTube channel. Go subscribe to his YouTube channel. He's doing all sorts of work. He's live over there with me as well. I'd have to refresh the screen to see the numbers accurately reflected, but all sorts of videos you do with academics. Tell us a little bit about your channel briefly, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I started my channel to not only share my research and my ideas, but also to bring on academics and discuss what they believe and what they've been looking into as well. So I can put all of this information together in the form of videos, so that way people can go easily find them and to learn as I learn, to gain knowledge as I gain knowledge. So they can gain knowledge with me. And so we're all in on the journey together. We're all learning together is basically what the show is about.
Thank you so much. Look, we'll go show some of the other stuff here shortly and cover some material. What do you have in store for us today, Jacob?
So for 13 years, and this is really where my journey really began, it's all had to do with Ishkur since 2013, starting with realizing that Yahweh has a daddy, Yahweh has a father, God has a father. That's the first show we did together, all the way in 2019. And basically, I wanted to learn about, okay, who is El? Who is this this forgotten father of the biblical deity? And that led me to realizing that, Ishkur has all these similarities to the God of the Bible. I realized that El is a later version of Enlil. It's a shorter version of his name. It's the same God. And that's okay. So it's probably one of Enlil's children that became the God of the Bible, or one of his so-called children that became the God of the Bible. And when it came to the point of comparing Ishkur to the God of the Bible, when it came to that point, I started realizing that there's a lot of similarities with Ishkur and the God of the Bible, like a lot. Like,
yeah, I'll just say up front, I didn't even know about this God. Like, I maybe have heard him passing. I'm like, so maybe think of all of us as people who probably don't know who Ishkur is, you know?
He is a Sumerian storm god. He can cause drought, floods, plagues as well. He is commanding. He's portrayed as commanding deities that have the power to bring plagues and drought. This is even more expressed, I would say, in the Anatolian text. Anatolia is modern day Turkey, by the way. And Ishkur was massively worshipped in Anatolia, and that's going to be a major focal point in this stream, especially when we talk about Noah and the location of where Noah's Ark supposedly lands in Genesis. We will get to that point during the presentation, and all of you will see where I'm going with that.
Yeah.
But essentially, Ishkur has a lot of parallels. He does kind of die and rise again in the Anatolian text. He has his organs taken from him, and a god helps bring back those organs to him. That's Sharuma. And so he causes floods. I'm also going to get into the scholarship about about Ishkur being the chief god of the Hyksos. Now, just so we're clear, I'm not saying the Hyksos are the Jews. I know that I know that's a claim that some make, the Hyksos, and the Hyksos are the ancient Jews. But I think that their story was more like an inspiration, or in today's vernacular, plagiarism, for creating the book of Exodus, or the Exodus narrative that we see there coming out of Egypt. Regardless of how you look at that, Ishkur is nevertheless a chief god of the Hyksos. and you have like one of the leading Egyptologists, Manfred Bitek himself, specifying that Baal-Hadad, that's Ishkur, is the chief god of the Hyksos, of people that go in and out of Egypt. And he basically made this point on my channel, and that Baal-Hadad is the chief god of the Hyksos, which is important.
I think Jan Assmann also thinks along the same lines, in the sense that the story, at least, is utilized. The Hyksos expulsion, which was historical, may have been a template or used as a template within the Exodus motif. Real quick, Brian Evans, thank you. Anyone who super chats, of course, you get to ask questions, comments, whether you're on History Valley's channel or on MythVision. We really appreciate the support. Keeps the lights on. Thank you so much for that super chat. Can't believe I'm now discovering this channel. I love learning about both mythology and religion. Looks like I have catching up to do. Don't we all? We've been doing this for a long time, and we still have a lot of catching up to do. But also, since you're here on MythVision super chatting, why don't you check out History Valley? There's a lot of academic work over there. I encourage everybody to go and check out his research as well, and the scholarship brings on. So figure, why not shamelessly plug you at the same time, since they're just trying to discover information, Jacob. Again, thank you for the super chat. Sorry to interrupt, Jacob. Hey, if they super chat though, you know, we gotta.
Oh, I know. I know how it goes. I do the same thing. It's all good. But yes, there's a passage, I believe it's in Isaiah, in which you have the God character, you have the God of the Bible saying something pretty interesting, saying something to the effect of, Egypt was once my people, and the Assyrians my handiwork.
Right.
Now, what would make him say such a thing like that? Egypt was once my people? It's like he's trying to make a distinction in which, well, I had a different people at one time. And you could look at that as being a passing reference to the Hyksos when they were in Egypt. And so again, they're not exactly the same people as the Jews, but their narrative that became the Jewish Exodus story was an inspiration. And I think that what's being said in Isaiah about Egypt being once my people lines up with that pretty well, I would say.
Interesting. Yeah, I've never heard that interpretation of that text, that particular, but it is interesting to think of it through that lens. So you're, just so we recap so far, you're suggesting that what you aren't, the academics you've researched and then primary sources you went to go check, is that the Hyksos, who are an Asiatic peoples that were in Egypt, even ruling in Egypt, eventually get expelled or expulsion, an exodus, so to speak, of these people out of Egypt, go back into Lebanon, Syria / northern Asia, if you will, of the time. And these people had a god named Ishkur, and Ishkur's father's name was Enlil, and you would argue that Enlil is El in the Canaanite, Phoenician, Eastern Mediterranean coast kind of pantheon prior to Israel. And Ishkur, you think, might be Yahweh? Yes. Okay. We're listening. Please do it. Let me know when you want me to present something too, because I might forget.
Yeah, we'll get to that in just a moment. But another point that, and this is going to be toward the end of the presentation, is I'm going to talk about the identity of Baal-Hamon. I brought this up before in our previous discussion about Ishkur, because some people got confused. I saw some of the comments. They were screaming like, "Oh, the biblical Baal can't be Yahweh." I'm like, that's not what I'm saying. They don't understand that Baal is a title. It is not a name, people. It is a title, okay? There's even a Hebrew word called Baalim. There's a reason why. It's plural for Baal, because there was more than one Baal. It's right there in the Tanakh. You can see passages in Hosea and elsewhere that use the word Baalim. Okay, so Elohim, masculine, plural. So anyway, my point is, when you look at Baal-Hamon, how was he worshipped? He was worshipped in a very horrific way, with infant sacrifice. They literally took infants and lit them on fire. And this was happening in Carthage located in North Africa. And so Baal Hammon is the Baal they were talking about. If you read passages, I believe it's in Jeremiah, they describe the worship of the biblical Baal as setting children up to the flame, just like what you see in Carthage. So that's what they were describing. Child sacrifice, at least to my knowledge, was not occurring with the other Baals, but it did happen with Baal Hammon in North Africa. So that's what they were talking about. And if you see the Book of Kings as a Hellenistic era composition, and there are scholars like Bartos Adamczewski that do put it in the Hellenistic period, then it's about the First Punic War. I think it's about the First Punic War. Now, Bartos did not make that specific argument. I'm making that specific argument that Kings is aware of the First Punic War. Just to be clear, he has different arguments for why he puts Kings in the Hellenistic period. But anyway, I just wanted to note that he does agree for different reasons that Kings is in the Hellenistic period. So I just wanted to make that point real fast before we start this presentation, that it is not, I am not claiming that the biblical Baal and Yahweh are somehow the same. They're not. And I just explained which Baal the biblical Baal is based upon.
Okay.
That's all.
Gotcha.
So let's get to the slides. I think we're ready to get there.
Let me stop sharing, add it to the screen. Here we go.
Yeah. So the title was simple. Ishkur is Yahweh, how the Sumerian storm god became the god of the Bible. So I just want to show this reference real quick from James Anderson, Monotheism and Yahweh's Appropriation of Baal. Can you see my mouse right here, Derek?
To
the top right?
Barely.
Okay.
Kind of hard to read it. It's a lot of small text, but
okay.
I could do this. I mean, for the
moment, put it on full screen. That's easier. Yeah. All right. I won't be long on this particular slide. I just wanted to show everybody real quick that look at the top right, the first sentence. Ishkur was also used to denote Adad and other manifestations of the storm god, including Adu Baal. So that's just to get us started off so everybody understands that this is consensus that Ishkur, Adad, and Baal Hadad are different names of the same god. So that way, when they understand that I'm referring to the same god under these different names, they can keep track. And this, I like this as being the first slide we look at in terms of the actual references, because look at what we see in the bottom of the first large paragraph. You have the mention of Mari, and you have the mention of Tyre, and so that's going to be very fitting because toward the end of the presentation, we're going to get into those details as well, and the stuff about Adad of Aleppo, which is just a different version of the same god. So again, that's going to be pretty important there. Okay, so this is yet another reference. Ishkur is Baal Hadad. This is from Fedor J. Lewis. And I have the arrow right here so everybody can quickly find where it is on this page. Look, you see he puts Ishkur, Adad, and Hadad in the same as the same god right there.
Right.
/ Like they're synonymous. And then, exactly, that's the point. So again, just want to get that out of the way real quick. Now we're going to start getting into the parallels. Ishkur causes death and destruction and floods. So I'm just going to read this little translation real quick. When the Lord is raging, the heavens tremble at Ishkur's wrath. The earth on its part also shakes. The great mountains are all thrown down, decked with august, fearful splendor, who with his whoop herds together the thick rain clouds. And I know at the bottom, Yahweh causes the great flood in the book of Genesis. And so what you have is, you have Ishkur wielding this power to cause mass floods, deluges. Now this takes me to the book of Genesis, Mount Ararat. Where is that located? Well, it's right there on the map.
Let me show people.
Yeah.
We kind of prepared this actually for this episode, because I did another episode recently on the origins of hell. You could see
Yeah.
on the world map where we're at here.
Yeah.
Saudi Arabia, the whole nine. And to just show you, up here near Armenia is where Mount Ararat is. It's this snow-capped mountain right here.
Now, I just want to make something clear that Teshub, which is what the ancient Anatolians referred to Ishkur as, or Tarhana, is another name for Ishkur in that territory. Again, that's modern-day Turkey. Where does Noah's Ark land?
Ararat.
He lands in Turkey, at Mount Ararat specifically. That's my point. So why is it that in the book of Genesis, they just happen to choose that location for the fictional landing of Noah's Ark at Mount Ararat?
Right.
Because, in my view, it's because Ishkur is the God of the Bible.
So the geography, you're saying, not only is
Lines
the
up.
God synonymous that you were talking about, but the geography kind of makes the synonymous connection for you.
Yes.
Okay.
Precisely.
Interesting.
Now, the next parallel we got here, we have Ishkur, aka Adad, and Shamash taking Enmedaranki to heaven, just like what we see in Genesis when Enoch is taken to heaven, like I note in the bottom of the page. And anybody can look this up, just like anything else I talk about. You can look it up and confirm these parallels yourself. So Enmedaranki is taken up to heaven by Ishkur, and you can already note that this is all piling up on top of the other similarities I've already went over. And it's only going to continue to pile up further. So I'll read this translation real quick. Shamash and Ababara appointed Enmedaranki king of Sippar, the beloved of Anu, Enlil, and Ea. Shamash and Adad brought him in to their assembly. Shamash and Adad honored him. Shamash and Adad set him on a large throne of gold. They showed him how to observe oil on water, a mystery of Anu, Enlil, and Ea. They gave him the tablet of the gods, the liver, a secret heaven, and underworld. They put in his hand the cedar rod, beloved of the great gods. Now, this is another. This is John J. Collins noting the parallel as well. At least this is an editorial, so I think it was him.
Yeah, it says
anyway.
John Collins, right?
Yeah. But anyway, Shamash and Ibabara appointed Enmedaranki king of Sippar, the beloved Anu, Enlil, and Ea. Shamash and Adad brought him to their assembly. So you see, it just reads the same way, practically.
Mhm.
Now, if you read the second paragraph right here, and being moved to seventh place, Enoch took on some attributes of one of the long-lived antediluvian figures of the Sumerian kings list. So they're noting that Enmedaranki parallels Enoch.
Right. So you
So
have
this is-
geography of the boat landing in Ararat. You've got the parallel in the Enoch tradition with the older Sumerian king list, with Ishkur involved in that.
Yes. So Ishkur is involved in both situations.
Got it.
Now, this is where things start to get a bit more interesting. Ishkur overthrows Enlil. So this is in the Baal cycle, okay? And you have Baal seized the sons of Aphirat, that's Asherah. He smote the great ones with the broadsword. He smote the pounders of the sea with the mace. He dragged the yellow ones of Mot to the ground. Then did Baal sit upon the throne of his kingdom, on the cushion, on the seat of his dominion. Okay. So what's happening here is you have Baal overthrowing the 70 sons of El. And I'm going to get into more detail on that in a second. But if we keep looking at this translation here, it says, days pass from days, they pass into months, from months into years. Then in the seventh year, I find it interesting that the number 7 is noted here in a kind of a special way, kind of like the seventh day, the Sabbath is important in Genesis because that's when God rests after the 6-day creation. But here it's different. So it's like, I feel like Genesis is inverting this story because it says here, then in the seventh year, divine Mot to mightiest Baal. He lifted up his voice and cried, because of you, Baal, I have suffered abasement. Because of you, I have suffered splitting with the sword. Because of you, I have suffered burning with fire. Because of you, I have suffered grinding with millstones. Yeah, so I'll head to the next slide then. This is from the Anatolian text, the Song of Hedemu. So Ea began to say, why are you destroying mankind? It will not give sacrifices to gods. It will not burn cedar and incense to you. If you destroy mankind, they will no longer worship the gods. No one will offer bread or libations to you any longer. Even Tisab, Kumia's heroic king, who himself worked the plow, Ea, king of wisdom, said to Kumarbi, why are you, O Kumarbi, seeking to harm mankind? Does not the mortal take a grain heap, and do they not promptly offer it to you, Kumarbi? Does he make offering to you alone, Kumarbi, father of the gods, joyfully in the midst of the temple? Now, there are different versions of the rebel story, of this rebellion against Ishkur. So you have the song, you have the Hedemu song, you have the song of Ilyanka, you have Ulukumi's rebellion. It's the same character with different names. You have the song of the silver one too. So this is from Alberto Green, the storm god in the ancient Near East. And this is what he had to say about the popularity of Ishkur or Adad among the Hurrians. I was just talking about Hurrian myths and Hittite myths as well just now. The popularity of Adad among the Hurrians is also apparent in the Nuzi text, which identified a Hurrian storm god Tishab with Adad. In addition, in the Hittite capital of Hattusha, the cult of Adad and his consort became so important that the city was once referred to as the city of the storm god or Tishab of Halab. The Nuzi archives also list a temple of Tishab Halpaheh. It was in Syria proper. However, that the power, prestige, and importance of the storm god Adad emerged during the Middle Bronze Age to such unrivaled prominence that he became the most important and profusely cited deity in the Near East. Now, this is something else I do want to note here, because we're going to start getting into Greco-Roman parallels that are important to what I'm talking about. And so you see the Song of Hedemu and the Song of Ulukumi is being compared by Ian Rutherford in his Hittite text and Greek religion, contact, interaction, and comparison. And what you see here is, again, the Song of Hedemu has to deal with an eel-like sea monster, child of Kumarbi, and a daughter of the sea god. Hedemu succumbs to being seduced by the sonic and visual charms of Tisab's sister, Suska, equated with Ishtar of Nineveh, a motif that Noga Ayali Darshan has recently argued is borrowed from an earlier narrative of the storm god's conflict at sea, which originated somewhere in the Levant. And again, you see the same thing in the Canaanite text. In the Baal cycle, Baal Hadad fights the sea, Yam. Yahweh fights Yam too. That's what the sea is called of the Tanakh. That's a big problem for people trying to claim that Yam is Yahweh because the name sounds alike. No, he can't be, because Yam shows up in the Tanakh as an enemy of Yahweh. Doesn't work. Anyway.
Yeah, you made me think of Giovanni Garbini. I didn't bring the book, but he argues that in the Canaanite Baal cycle, I could actually pull it up if you want to continue. I think it's worth bringing up just so people can see what another expert has to say about this, because he argues that Yahweh was in the Canaanite pantheon already. Because usually, Mark S. Smith, other brilliant scholars have pulled that Yahweh comes from the south. Well, he argues that he thinks Yahweh was already at home in the Canaanite pantheon. I'll pull it up for you while you're doing your thing.
Yeah. I believe Niels Peter Lemke holds the same position as I do. The so-called reference to Yahweh in the Canaanite text is really just Yam, and it's not a different god. And my problem, I've heard of this theory before, and my problem with it is it's grasping at straws in my view, because other than something sounding alike by itself, there's no narrative parallel to the God of the Bible. Does this so-called Yahweh of canon do any of the things God the Bible does? Can he be properly distinguished from Yam? And I already know the answer to that question, to both questions, is no. And I think it's an attempt to try to rescue that Yahweh is unique. And I don't think it works. And again, like I said, there's no narrative parallel between the so-called Yah of canon and Yahweh of the Bible.
Mm.
They just had that one little sentence to work from, Yah ben El, and that's it. That's practically nothing, almost nothing.
Right.
I mean, it looks like Yam to me.
Let me show you this, right? So this is can you see the screen?
I do. I see it.
Okay. It might be loading, so bear with. I'm gonna go down to page 54, something like that. It's still loading. Here we go. Okay. So this is his book. It's Giovanni Garbini, History. Let me go back up to the top. Sorry. Make sure you guys can see it. It's loading pretty slowly on here. I may have to pull it up on a different app.
No problem.
I want to show you the title. History and Ideology in Ancient Israel is the name of it right here.
Yeah.
And we need to get to page 54. Computer's being super duper slow. Don't know why, but it is. I think it's around 54 where he actually addresses this issue. So he wants to explain the origin of Yahweh. And, you know, a lot of people say it comes from the South, and he actually takes on some of the major scholars who've argued they think it comes from, you know, the South. Let us now go in and examine the extra biblical evidence, right? So notwithstanding it is sporadic and apparently secondary character, the epigraphic evidence is a basic point of discussion for our topic because it is the only original evidence relating directly to the worship of Yahweh. It should be said straight away that the epigraphic evidence, and more generally the written extra biblical sources, do not confirm the picture that the Old Testament presents of the rise and establishment of the cult of Yahweh in the form that we usually denote with the term Yahwism. So he goes on. Let me scroll down. He uses internal evidence too. Like in this connection, let us look at the treatment received by some onomastic evidence, which the Old Testament itself provides favor of the existence of the cult of Yahweh outside the Israelite sphere. And he goes on to describe that using some biblical text. I want to skip down a little bit so we're not boring everybody to death. So here's where it gets interesting. He says, the Hebrew name's quite uncertain. This assertion is all the more remarkable in that it was made by no less a scholar than Noth, who in the pages which he devotes to the presence of the divine name Yahweh in Hebrew nomenclature, in fact, proves more of a theologian than a linguist. He's taking a jab at Martin Noth, right? He says, this is demonstrated. Get that up here. This is demonstrated clearly by the final words of his investigation, in which, having summarily liquidated the Amorite onomastica and having also turned Yalbibi, the Aramaean king of Hamath, known to us from the annals of Sargon II, into an Israelite, who he calmly went on to say, thus in no case is the name Yahweh to be encountered outside and independently of Israel, so the tradition of the book of Exodus could be right, namely that the divine name Yahweh arose for the first time in Israel, or better, for the first time with the people of Israel, and therefore in some way goes back to the work of Moses. If this has been the fate of the biblical evidence, it will not be difficult to imagine that reserved for extra biblical evidence that the discoveries of the text have produced, leaving aside the mention of Yahweh. This is the good part. So he says, mention of Yahweh in the stele of Mesha, because of the corruptness of the text. We've already noted Yalbibi of Hamath. Then there are the Amorite onomastica of Mari and some other Syrian cities, which can be dated around the 18th century BC, which offer various attestations of names compounded with Yahweh or Yahweh and Yah. Since this last element is taken as a hypochoristic suffix, it has long been quite certain that the nature of the word is verbal, and it is thus safeguarded from dangerous onomastic comparisons. From Noth to W.F. Albright and to the latter's docile pupil H.B. Huffman, it has been the merit of A. Finnett, first in a study dedicated to King Yahweh Elah, and then in the specific article to have demonstrated convincingly the formal identity between Yahweh, and the name of the Hebrew God, when a fragmentary text from Ugarit belonging to the mythological Baal cycle produced a verse in which the god El said, and this is exactly what the god El said. Here we go.
Yeah, the name of my son.
The name of my son is Yah, right? Exact source. Many scholars hastened to correct the text to remove the mention of Yah. When the arbitrariness of this procedure was pointed out, they found different ways to deny the evidence. One was to see Yah as the usual verbal form interpreted in different ways. One was to suggest a phonetic variant of Yam, the Ugaritic god of the sea. Very few scholars follow Abby H. Cazellas in accepting the existence of God Yah at Ugarit, even though he is a god who moreover continues to be attested in the area even in the next millennium, as Porphyry testifies in Eusebius' preparation for the gospel, when he asserts that the gospel Yahweh was worshipped at Berytus. So the same deity, he argues, in a whole millennium later is in the same region of Phoenicia, still being called the same God. This is it. He's arguing he thinks the same God that's in the Baal cycle. Anyway, sorry for my diatribe there, but at least I got to see the scholarly work.
Well, I could, if I wanted to, I could go another direction and talk about Ayas, in which some link to Yahweh. And guess who he's helping in the Anatolian text? Ishkur. So even I can throw in a Yah connection there as being subordinated to Ishkur, which would still lead me to the same conclusion anyway, with an extra step. And so here's the point about this Yah thing, and this is what makes the argument weak. Anybody can play that game. I gave an example just now. Some people have argued
that a Yah is in the name. You're saying that the name has a Yah.
Yes. And he is equated with Ea. I'm not saying he is Ea, but he is equated with Ea.
Well, and I know a lot of people have thought Yahweh was a trickster deity to some extent. Oh, the day you eat the fruit, you will die. So maybe there's a merging of things happening here in Genesis.
My point is, no matter how you look at where the name Yahweh came from, to me it doesn't matter as much as the fact of the matter is that Yahweh is a massive imitation of Ishkur, to the point to where, like, how much more similar does it take before we start saying they just renamed Ishkur to Yahweh? Yeah, maybe they got inspired from something else being called Yah. And there are different deities called Yah, and not all of the Yahs are the same either, is my point. There's a Yah of Egypt. He's a moon god. So there are several different Yahs. And that's the point that I want to make clear to the audience.
I wanted to mention this because specifically, this guy is a philologist, right? So he's not only looking at the archaeology and stuff, and I think that, it's important to understand there is a debate around where the god Yahweh comes from, where this name comes from. He argues it's still at home in Canaan, right? Which would still tie into a genealogical connection to the older Ulikumi, the Hittites, all of that kind of stuff. So rather than acting like this deity just emerges like randomly out of nowhere from the south, he's trying to say it's at home already in the north. And this is actually what you're trying to argue, except you're just trying to say that the name Yah doesn't necessarily have any significance for Ishkur.
Right. And again, when Ishkur becomes God of the Bible, I think they deliberately wanted to give him a name that, even though it resembles Yah, they wanted to give him a name that was very different from other gods to make him distinct. Hosea 2:16 or 2:18, depending on the text you're reading. It says not to call him. I'm sorry?
Should I come back to you and me for a second? Because you're not presenting.
Yeah, that's fine. Depending on the text you read, you could say, okay, he's called, depending on the version of the Bible you're reading, but it says not to call him Bali, my master, anymore, but to call him Ishi, my husband. So he's one of the Baals of canon. Hosea is just admitting that right there. and it fits like a glove with what you see in Exodus, that the golden calf with Ishkur. I'm sorry, with Yahweh. When Yahweh was being worshipped with a golden calf and Yahweh was mad, and then Moses breaks the tablets when he sees the golden calf. So that just fits very well. And that actually takes me to my next point. I mentioned this to you before we went on air. Yana Matushak. I interviewed Yana Matushak. I haven't aired the interview yet, but she gets into a text about Ishkur and his multicolored cows. Or as I should say, I should be a little more careful and say Ishkur and multicolored cows being kidnapped by an unknown entity or entities. And cows are in the Tanakh.
Of course.
You got rules about not killing cows in Leviticus. So cows are kind of special, somewhat special in the story here. Why is that? And you could go look up the translation of the text, and just so everybody understands, the text is heavily damaged, unfortunately. And the parts of it that can be made out, Ishkur and multicolored cows were kidnapped by an unknown assailant or assailants. But it looks like this cattle theft seems to be the predecessor to the story of, I believe it was Hermes kidnapping Apollo's cattle in Greece, actually. This myth here is far older, much older.
Right.
Yeah.
Funny story. Very funny story. Are you talking about the infant? Because I think there's different versions of it, but there's infant Hermes comes out of his cradle the day he was born or something, goes and steals some cattle, and Apollo finds out, like, the evidence traces back to him in his cradle, and he's just wrapped in his swaddling cloths. Like, did you steal my cattle? Me, a wee little baby, would never steal your cattle. You know, like, I can't, I'm a baby, but he clearly did. This myth you're saying is older and likely the inspiration behind that story from the Greeks.
Yes.
Interesting.
I think so. We could go back to the slides. We're getting to the part now where Ishkur slays the 70 sons of Athirot. So I'll put that on full screen so that way they can see it a little bit more easily. We'll go to the first arrow in the bottom left. In the great second battle, Ulukumi boasts of the role of his father, Kumarbi has assigned him. Thereafter, though, there is a complete break in the text. It can be assumed the outcome is a final triumph of Tisab, since he is the supreme god in historical times. And we know that because we know that he's triumphal for other reasons, because in the song of Ilyanka, he is absolutely triumphant against Ilyanka, an older version of the same Ulukumi. And we go to the mid right, the arrow in the mid right here. You see my mouse. You have Baal's relationship with the children of Athira is rather rocky. Although he holds a feast for them, he eventually fights and defeats them. Baal slays in the West Semitic myth of El-Kanursa and attested in the Hittite Hurrian. And El and Athira act together in 161. In regulating the course of divine politics, and in our passage, Baal expresses the reality that their support is required to secure recognition of his own divine kingship. Yet Baal does not ask for the support of El and Athira only. So here's my point. We can go back to us for a second. What does the Tanakh make fun of sometimes? Oh, the gods, they can't hear you. Lifeless idols can't hear you. You know how, I think it's Elijah at one point mocks some people and says, Baal can't hear you.
Right.
Now, why is he saying such a thing like that? Oh, well, if it's a sequel to the Baal cycle, because Baal Hadad, the biblical god, has already killed them. Oh, no wonder they can't hear you. They're dead. You see my point?
I see what you're saying.
It's following that story practically perfectly, and at least in that respect. And that's the point I want to make here. And what you have here in Genesis is what? The table of 70 nations,
Right.
70 or 72 nations. You have this in Genesis. You have the gods being assigned nations in Deuteronomy, at least in an older version of it. You can see that in the Septuagint or Qumran. They're identical. They're very similar. They're identical. There's a little bit of differences, but they're virtually the same. The Masoretic text changes it to children of Israel instead. It's like, oh well, let's push that to the side. We don't like the implication that more than one deity is being implied here. We're just going to say divided based on the number of the children of Israel. That's the ticket. So that's what they do. But it fits thematically with other stories you see in the Tanakh in which David's complaining, "Hey Saul, you might want to slow down there, buddy. I know we hate each other, we're enemies, but you're going to push me out of Israel and force me to worship other gods." Why would David be made to say such a statement like that? What about Naaman? Now that's my favorite one because it's absolutely hilarious to me. Mobile Israel, literally digging up earth from Israel, putting it in carts so he can walk on Israeli earth. So Yahweh will be literally forced to protect him no matter where he goes. So I'm like, why do we have these kind of stories in the Tanakh if they're thinking, oh, there's only one God, there's only ever one God? No, if you leave Israel, you have to worship a different God. That's the implication here. Because each territory is a province of another deity. So that's what's going on.
Right. The geography is attached to the gods. Yeah.
Yeah. Now we can go back to the slides. So on the top, so when we look over here is what you got Hupasia, the mortal Hupasia. I didn't really talk about him before, Hupasias, or Hupasia. Hupasia helped Ishkur or Tishab bind the rebel Ilyanka or Ulukumi. So he binds Ilyanka, helps Ishkur defeat him. But then Inara, the goddess, she's a ally of Ishkur that helped him. Inara tells Hupasia, okay, there's just one thing you can't do, basically. Don't go look out the window to your family. So basically the story is kind of like Hupasia has a new life. I think that's the implication of the story. And he's cut off from his family. He can't go back. Don't open the window. Don't look outside to see them. But he does so. And she gets pissed. And unfortunately, the ending is broken. We don't know how it goes. But what Hupasia does have in common with Adam is a disobedience. Now, in Hosea 6:7, you have Adam breaking the covenant with God. But there's no mention of Eve. There's no mention of the garden. All those other fluffy details that are in Genesis is not in Hosea regarding Adam. So that is a later... I would say Genesis is developing a little bit more than what's going on in Hosea. But my point is the way Hosea is presenting Adam, because he lacks those details, in a way makes him a better parallel to this guy than what we see in Genesis. And it's interesting because there are much later stories. I do want to note there are much later stories. So I want to be careful there that try to embellish the fall, or embellish the what was really going on with Adam and Eve, and try to suggest that sexual intercourse was involved instead. And that's my point. It's kind of like, in a way, Hupasia being tempted to look out the window to his family, to his wife, and his children. He probably misses his wife. You see what I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's interesting, nonetheless, that this is a disobedience, and that's my point. You have a mortal that helps Ishkur. Inara helped Ishkur defeat the rebel. That's the point.
Mm.
And this is where Alberto talks about the situation. So I'll read a little bit about it. Okay, so having slept with Hupasia, Inara prepared a great banquet with drinks of every kind and invited Ilyanka, that's the rebel, who came with his children. Ilyanka and all the guests ate and drank and emptied every barrel and quenched their thirst. As a result, the dragon and his children could no longer go back into their hole. Hupasia, the mortal, then came and bound the dragon with a rope. Ilyanka, having now been immobilized, the storm god came and took his revenge by killing him and all the other gods who had accompanied him. Notice the all the other gods part.
Yep.
Kind of like the 70, it's the 70 that just got killed in the ball cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Let's keep going. Inara then built a house on a mountain in the country, warning Hupasia to stay inside and not look out of the window when she departed. But as anticipated in Inara's absence, Hupasia looked out of the window, saw his wife and children, and grew homesick. That's what I was just talking about. When Inara returned, he asked to be allowed to return home. The text then becomes fragmentary, but it is possible that Hupasia was punished or destroyed for his disobedience. Inara then returned to the town of Kishkalusa and placed her house of the watery abyss in the hand of the king. So now I'm going to shift to Marduk, because Marduk, I just want to be very clear, I am not claiming Marduk and Ishkur are the same. They are absolutely not the same. But Marduk does seem to absorb characteristics from Ishkur. So very curious characteristics. And that is what you have going on in the Enuma Elish. Let's see. So this is talked about by Samuel Noah Kremer and John Mayer. I'll read the top. The line of powerful male gods, Anu, Ea, and Marduk, each son in the image of the father, is much like Anu, Kumarbi, Teshub, or Sky, Kronos, Zeus. But Enuma Elish, the significant conflict is between the oldest gods and the young gods between the line of Anu, Ea, Marduk. Now, I'm going to skip to the end of the first paragraph. Apsu is killed by Ea and set as a foundation of Ea's temple city at Eridu. Tiamat is split into two by Marduk and made to form the foundation of the cosmos. Ea appears in the Kumarbi stories, as we have seen. His role is not all that clear, however, because key portions of the text have been lost. He appears to aid in the birth of Teshub. You remember I mentioned Aya earlier? Mm-hmm. That's what I'm talking about. Now look what's happening here. He's aiding in the birth of Teshub. He may have been named king of the gods. He seems to have been set up a figure, Kal, as king. And when Kal proved rebellious, Ea and Kumarbi determined to act against the rebel, probably with some success. It is part of the Kumarbi cycle in which Kumarbi plots against the gods, but Ea's part is rather more clear. Kumarbi fashioned the strange creature, the stone Ulukumi. Let's talk about that for a minute. We see this in India, in Hinduism, because Ishkur in India is called Indra. And Ulukumi over there is basically Vritra. And he was created by Tavishtar, or Tavishtar, however it's pronounced, or Diupita. To me, it's the same god, but two different names. And he creates Vritra to fight. And what does he do? He fights Indra. Indra defeats him. Same thing. And so so they're borrowing the same information that we're seeing here from Anatolia, just like the Greeks were borrowing from Anatolia too. They were both borrowing from Anatolia. And this is the point I'm trying to get to. How was Ishkur, or Teshub as he's called in the Anatolian text, born? He emerged out of Kumarbi's skull, Kumarbi's in-law. Now, I will admit there are other situations where they were for some reason portrayed as two different gods, but there are other times when Kumarbi and in-law are the same, and I think that that's because they were originally the same. So you have a situation where he's coming out of his skull. It's like watching the movie Alien or something. So he's coming out of his skull, like, wait a minute, I've seen that. That's Athena rising out of Zeus's skull. Now, that right there is a big problem for anyone that identifies Zeus with Teshub or Ishkur, because some make that comparison. In fact, the authors of this book here were kind of implying that identification in the first sentence we went over earlier. So, does it work? Because Zeus's stories, if you look at Zeus's character, I'm not going to get into too much details because we're going off topic, but he strongly parallels Enlil, massively. But anyway, this is just one of those similarities. They both have the skull origin in common when it comes to Ishkur or Athena.
Right.
So the Greeks, we've talked about it before. I'm not going to get into it too much here. I suspect the Greeks adapted Ishkur as Ares. But originally, he was going to be a bigger, more powerful god. But Hesiod decided, nah, we're not going to go in that direction. We're going to go take a different direction. Because he decides, we're going to have Zeus find out about this. And he's going to swallow Metis whole, Cronos style. So that way, this son that will be more powerful than Zeus's thunderbolt will never emerge. So instead, you have Athena, a literary override of Ishkur in terms of the birth narrative. And Athena is based on a different Sumerian goddess. She's Anunnatu. I think she's Anunnatu, with Sumerian goddess of war and virginity. She's mentioned as a daughter of Enlil, by the way, and apparently being very, very loyal to Enlil, very similar to the relationship we see between Athena and Zeus, by the way. And Anunnatu, by the way, is actually a virgin goddess. Why do I make that point? Because you know how sometimes a goddess can be a virgin and yet she has husbands somehow? And there's stories of a sexual nature. I'm like, but I thought you were a virgin goddess. Well, she's actually a virgin goddess and it stays that way, like Athena. Okay, so that's my point. So they have that in common, from what I know.
It's interesting too, just to note, Athena is frequently interpreted as having masculine or at times male-coded identity within Greek mythology. And that's despite being a female goddess. Of course, she comes directly from a male's head. She's not born of a woman, so she has a lot of masculine attributes that, she's understood as. So, what's going on by the time the Greeks are doing this might be a little bit different from what obviously the earlier myths they're borrowing from are, but it's still interesting to speculate about it and wonder,
But one way or the other, the similarity is too great there, like the birthing of the skull thing. I mean, it's they got it from them. And obviously, the speculative part is how they changed the details of what they were thinking. The way I look at it is I think they were just skipping some steps, like, well, the reader can just simply assume that Metis just gave birth to Athena while she was inside the skull, and then Athena rose out of the skull when she grew up inside Zeus's head. I don't know, but whatever. Doesn't really matter. And a little depiction here in Marduk slaying Tiamat in the top left image, top right image, Yahweh slays Leviathan in the book of Hosea. And in the bottom, Teshub and Sharuma slaying Ilyanka in the song of Ilyanka. You see that giant wiggly serpent right there?
Right.
That's Ilyanka. Or it's interesting because as Ulu,
that's Leviathan, that's Tiamat, that's Ilyanka, that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's interesting because when he becomes Ulukumi in the Hittite stories, I don't think I have that backwards. But anyway, Ulukumi, which is a different version of Ilyanka, is a stone giant instead. So sometimes he's a serpent, sometimes he's that. So they're depicting the same person differently. That can happen. But anyway,
interesting.
Now this Damkini's bond, if this is not clear, if this is not what makes it clear that Marduk is taking over for Ishkur and some of these details, I don't know what will. So in Damkini's bonds, a small little text, and you got essentially Marduk seizing Enlil. Marduk and his forces seize Enlil in battle. I'm like, okay, so Marduk is Like Marduk, who went from just being a minor Sumerian deity, now he's this ultra powerful Babylonian god. And he's doing what Ishkur does. These details are much later, by the way, in the other text I'm talking about, if I remember the dating correctly. And what's interesting is, it's interesting that in the Tanakh, Marduk is criticized as a false god. In Jeremiah, I believe it's in chapter 50. Marduk, the false god of Babylon. Ishkur is never criticized in the entire Bible. Ever. Marduk is. So I think they kept track. I really think they did. I think they kept track of these changes. And they were very careful to avoid critiquing Ishkur, or even different versions of Ishkur, different names of him, not mentioned in the Bible, because they were trying to be careful. Not Yahoo, same thing. Not Yahoo's Yahweh's wife. And the Elephantine Papyri. That's one of my other best evidence for my theory. Oh, it just happens that Anat Yahoo is Anat is Baal Hadad's wife. That's right. The same goddess as Baal Hadad's wife in the Canaanite text. That's a problem for trying to come up with a theory. Okay, well, this Yah sounded like all the way over there is that's somehow Yahweh with no narrative similarities. How do you explain him having the same wife? On top of all the other similarities I've talked about in this vast integration of the data. So I'll just read some of the bottom.
This guy has a great last name. I'm not biased though.
W.G. Lambert.
I just want people to know how great his last name is. That's all I'm saying, bro. Yeah.
But yeah, I'll read some of this real quick. Why not? For Damkana, whose bond you have released, the gods of Esumusa, Marbiti of the Apsu conquered them altogether. In their midst, Enlil addressed Marbiti of the Apsu. You are Marbiti of the Apsu. You are a gracious king. Why do you conquer us as if we were evil? The king of the gods, Marduk, opened his mouth to speak, addressing Enlil. Come consult with one another among your Anunnaki. Yeah. So yeah, you see this capturing did happen in the text, and they're discussing how to resolve the matter. But again, Marduk absorbs the characteristics of many other gods. Look at the bunch of names that Marduk is called. So he's absorbing the characteristics of these deities. That's what's happening here. The original Marduk, as I was just saying a moment ago, that Marduk is or was originally a minor sun god in the Sumerian pantheon. It's really in the name. I think CJ Chrysostomo in his translation, scholarship, makes it clear. Marduk's name is written in the cuneiform Ammar Utu, which means son of the sun. Utu was his father, not Enki. That's a later situation. Utu was his original father. That's the implication of Marduk's name. That's why his name means literally son of Utu. So it's right there. Not hard at all. Anybody can look that up in 5 seconds. Now let's talk about Ishkur as Baal Hadad, chief god of the Hyksos. The late Donald Rufford talks about in his Oxford Encyclopedia of Ancient Egypt. I got the snippet view of it right here from page 352. Egyptian storm god Seth, Egyptian version of Ishkur, was then introduced as the dynasty's god, with every reason to believe that he's actually the Syrian Canaanite storm god Hadad Baal Sephon, because a cylinder seal with his representation is known. And that really takes me to my next point. Look at the story of Sharuma. What does Sharuma do? He retrieves the organs of Tishub. Yeah. Does that sound like something similar? The roles are reversed in Egypt, okay? But you have Set cutting Osiris up into a bunch of different pieces. Then Isis had to go put those pieces back together. You see my point?
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same story. It just got inverted. But yeah, That's what's going on here. It's the same story. So this identification the Egyptians have of Seth and Baal Hadad is completely understandable. They must have been aware of those similarities.
Real quick, super chat. Some dude, thank you for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. Derek, are you familiar with Israel Anderson? I am not. Would love to see him on sometime. I will write that down right now and look into it.
All right.
So thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate that. All right. Sorry. Go ahead, Jacob.
Oh no, you're fine. So here's where Telopino comes in, or Telepenes, the son of Tisham. Telopino, he runs, he flees, and because he ran and he fled, agriculture just started to fail everywhere. And so the goddess Hanahana sent a bee to go and find him. And it finds him, but it stung him back into life. Or I should say stung him back to consciousness, I meant to say. Now, when we go to the Ishkur and the cow story that we talked about earlier, well, Ishkur literally is that kind of detail is true about himself. You have Ishkur being seized and captured, and it's implied, and the fox shows up in the story, and it appears to be implied that there needs to be a search to go find him. I actually asked Yana Matusha during the interview, and everybody will see this soon when I air it, if she thinks there could be a correlation there. Because it's interesting, because I think that you could make an argument that Ishkur became his own son, Telopino, because instead of this happening to Ishkur himself and the Anatolian story, you have this story of the search for the missing god kind of reallocated to his son, which could be seen as a duplication of himself. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Mr. Monster, for being a member for 43 months. He says, amazing educational content. Thank you so much. Yeah, Jacob worked hard on this, getting prepared to, give his thoughts.
Now, here's why I brought this up. The Son of Man. And this is the irony of it all. The avoidance of making the comparison between Baal Hadad and Yahweh. Now there are some scholars that have compared them before, but not to this extent. But they like to compare him to the Son of Man. You know how they like to compare the Son of Man descending from the clouds, Baal Hadad, the rider of the clouds. You know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Well, if that's okay, you see what I'm getting at? If that's okay, if the Son of Man could be an imitation or potentially a Judaized version of Baal Hadad, why not Yahweh too? And then I just showed that there's some evidence that indicates that he literally became his own son in the Anatolian story, as its detail of finding the god that went missing or kidnapped is delegated to his own son. In a different culture. Yahweh himself is also understood, I believe it's in the Psalms, as a cloud rider. So both the Son of Man and Yahweh kind of have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
With Baal Hadad. That's my point.
I agree.
Let's see what Christopher Hayes has to say in Wenamun's prophetic mission. And again, this is going to get to the Baal. Ishkur Baal Hadad equals Seth.
I thought you were about to get down to the balls. But, we've said balls so many times on this show today, huh?
That's true. We go to the second paragraph here. Since Wenamun is set in the 21st dynasty, probably written in the 22nd dynasty, it fits well into what is known about the Egyptian reception of Baal Seth. After the Hyksos period, Baal Seth was mentioned less during the 18th dynasty. but then gradually grew in popularity again, seemingly thanks to traders in contact at the Levantine coast because of Baal's role as a controller of the sea. Now, if you go to the bottom here, the bottom of this paragraph, it says here, for example, Ramses II not only claimed to be beloved of Amun, his father, but also called himself Seth Baal and boasted that the Hittites said to him, "You are Seth, Baal in person. The dread of you is a fire in the land of Hadi. The mighty pharaoh was Baal." So again, you have different situations in which Ishkur, aka Baal Hadad, is yet again being identified with Seth, even in reference to Pharaoh Ramses II.
And I don't want to give away the secret here, but you're probably going to get to some of that, is that Seth was identified with Yahweh.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yes.
Yeah.
That's the implication here, is that they're the same God. Yeah.
Got it.
They're all the same God. And again, you have James K. Hoffmeyer. He talks about right here in the first sentence here, Hyksos king adopted Seth for himself as Lord. And this is interesting. We got kind of a henotheism, almost monotheism going on here. And he refused to serve any god that was in the entire land except Seth. Isn't that interesting? This is a couple of centuries before Beaten, the monotheistic god of Pharaoh Akhenaten. Seth, of course, was an Egyptian deity who corresponds to Baal of the Semitic world. Orly Goldwasser recently explained that the offense of the Hyksos is not that they worship Seth, but the fact that the Hyksos ruler did not worship any other god in the entire land except Seth. The use of the word "except," I probably mispronounced that, is the same exclusionary word used by Akhenaten to describe Aten. I was just mentioning something like that a moment ago. And I'll get to the second paragraph here. I'll just read this last thing from this slide. Goldwasser's observations are quite intriguing. It is difficult, even after 4 decades of excavations at Tel el-Adaba, to know if Apophis worshipped only one deity. However, the main temple of Avaris was a precinct of Baal Seth, which thrived throughout the Hyksos period, and was even restored in Tutankhamun's and Horemheb's reign. I was just mentioning that Ishkur was a rider of the cloud, so we're going to get into some of that evidence from Jonathan L. McLaughlin. Excuse me. So Jonathan L. McLaughlin says, I'm going to read just the bottom to save time. In keeping with the storm imagery, there is also a parallel between Yahweh and Baal in terms of their movement through the air. One of Baal's common titles in the Ugarit text is the rider on the clouds, which is often compared with Psalm 68:5. However, contrary to the NRSV's, him who rides upon the clouds, the latter actually says the one who rides in the deserts, which fits the references to Yahweh coming from Sinai in verses 9 and 18. Nonetheless, the rain in verse 9 presumes the presence of clouds, and since the difference between the Hebrew words for clouds and deserts is just one kazanot, the psalmist may still have had Baal's title in mind.
He had balls in mind?
Baal's title. Moreover, however, Yahweh does fly through the air, often in conjunction with clouds. Deuteronomy 33:26, Psalm 18:10-12, 68:34. Note the rider 104:3, Isaiah 19:1. Again, rider appears. Jeremiah 4:13, Nahum 1:3. This culminates in the one like a human being. Now,
all that desert imagery too just makes me think of Seth again too, but I don't want to like make super duper leaps without like philological.
Oh no, it's fine.
But you see what I'm saying? Like
there's already huge parallels with Set and Ishkur, so it's just piling. It's indirect piling, direct piling up, and this horizontal integration is totally fine in my view.
This whole Hyksos thing, it makes me want to go open up Jan Osman and go read all this stuff all over again, but really absorb it. You've got me thinking like. We always talk about the rise of monotheism and like, oh, that's all later, but it's like, why is this the only God they worship? And maybe it's tough to say what is being meant by this, because henotheism, like hyper monotheism, I don't even know if that exists. You know what I'm saying?
I think it's safer to call it henotheism because
Yeah.
it's the worship of one God while not denying the existence of others.
Right.
That's what it looks like. And
That's
so
what-
what you have is you have evidence of steps, small
Mhm.
steps, but over a long period of time, it gets to the situation that we see today.
Got
Now
it.
let's talk about Anat Yahu from Yahweh and the gods and goddesses of Canaan from John Day. This is something I brought up a few minutes ago.
Mhm.
He says, seems indisputable that the goddess Anat in the form of Anat Yahu did function as Yahweh's wife amongst the Jews at Elephantine in the 5th century BCE. Now, I do need to mention something real quick because I know somebody's going to say, what about Yahweh and his Asherah inscription? Okay, fair. I'm more in line with Margaret Barker's take on that situation. I think Asherah was just Yahweh's mother. But what I will say is I think what happened is Asherah got confused with Anat. You know about the triple goddess in canon. And so what happened is Anat and Asherah and Astarte, they got merged into a trinity, into a triune goddess. I think that's the reason why Asherah went from being his mother, because Asherah is Baal Hadad's mother. So why did she become his wife? Because his wife, Anat, was confused with her from the triple goddess syncretism.
I mean, yeah, there's so many possible explanations for it.
But it's one.
It's one. And yeah, I don't want to distract you. But yeah,
okay.
I think there's options. Yeah.
But anyway, the main point I'm bringing up here is you have in Elephantine, you have Anat Yahu, the consort, as a consort of Yahweh. And she is a consort of Baal Hadad and Canaan. Now, this is from Yahweh versus Baal, a conflict of religious culture from Norman C. Hubble. So I'll just I'll read from where my mouse is right here. So you see the arrow?
Hold
top
on.
in the bottom left?
I see the arrow, yeah.
Yeah, that's where. This is presumably a reference to the annual harvest cycle. At the end of 7 years, I talked about the 7 earlier, Mot, who is also aggravated by Baal's assassination of Mot's half-brothers, challenges Baal to a duel. The precise outcome of this heavenly encounter is not clear. The so-called Hadad text offers a similar theme in which a drought persists for 7 years as a result of an act of fratricide by Baal. But one thing is clear. The descent of Baal into the underworld in the preceding cycle is not the result of a battle against Mot. In that cycle, Baal's capitulation was quite docile and apparently a necessary consequence of the seasonal rotation. And I'll read to the text on the top here. He placed his feet on the footstool. He opened wide his gullet and laughed. He raised his voice and shouted, "Now I will sit enthroned and rest, and my soul shall rest in my breast. For Baal the victor is alive. For the Prince, Lord of the earth, exists." At last, we get to the biblical Baal. On the right, we have a depiction of Baal Hammon from Carthage. On the left, Milcom of the Ammonites. The Bible speaks of Milcom, and at one point, by mistake, by misspelling his name, he's called Moloch, the origin of the god Moloch. So Moloch is actually Milcom. Now, the Tanakh doesn't really make it clear, does not claim that the biblical Baal and Moloch are the same god. Nonetheless, the Tanakh claims that children were sent into the flames as sacrifice to both deities. Now, archaeologists have went through Ammon. They cannot find any archaeological evidence that children were sacrificed to this dude, Milcom, as of yet. Although evidence may turn up later. But Baal Hammon, yes, definitely in North Africa, in Carthage. Now, the Carthaginians are from Tyre, which is located in Canaan, next to the coast, it's next to the Mediterranean Sea.
Real quick, Jacob. Beachcomber 73, thank you for the super chat and being a member. If on the phone, to like and share on Derek's, use the 3 dots at right-hand top corner. Thank you for the super chat. I guess people were having trouble trying to share the stream. So thank you for the super chat.
I don't want to spend too much time on Baal Hammon, so I didn't really get much references here. And quite frankly, there's not even much information on this god. Most of the textual information about him comes from, I believe, from Greco-Roman sources that are polemical texts against the Carthaginians, in which they spoke of the Carthaginians as sacrificing babies by setting them ablaze to Baal Hammon. Now, they compared him, it was so grisly in their eyes, they compared him to Kronos or Saturn, because Saturn, what did he do? He tried to eat his babies because he was afraid it would overthrow him later. But anyway, just to be clear, I'm not claiming that Kronos is Baal Hammon, but the Romans were just making that comparison because they were similar. Take that however you will. But anyway, it occurred to me that the clue about who Baal Hammon really is was right in front of me. It's in his name, Lord Hammon, or Lord of Ammon. I think that's what it originally meant, Lord of Ammon. So the entire name was originally a title for this guy, of Milcom of the Ammonites. Milcom is attested in the Mari archives. I think it's in the Mari archives as Malcolm, kind of like the name Malcolm. So Malcolm is the more original name of Malcolm. So Malcolm becomes Milcom, and then Milcom became Lord of the Ammonites, or Baal Hammon. They just, the H is in front of the name Ammon, but anyway, Lord of the Ammonites. That's what I think that meant. And that explains why the Tanakh makes that parallel between Moloch and Baal, because they were both worshipped in the same way in child sacrifice. But like I said before, we don't really get archaeological evidence of child sacrifice to this god until we get to North Africa. When the Carthaginians they left Tyre and they went to North Africa, I believe it's in the early 1st millennium BCE. So this is the Baal Hammon this Baal Hammon is the god that became the biblical Baal. So that's what I'm trying to stress. This isn't I'm not claiming that the biblical Baal is Yahweh. That would be ridiculous. I'm saying that's a different deity. That's Baal Hammon, who to my knowledge is the only one worshipped in this kind of way. Child sacrifice. And so that's how it all comes together. And the Carthaginians, who were they originally? They were originally Canaanites from Tyre. That's why they're spoken of as Canaanites in the Tanakh. It's not that hard. Now let's talk about where it's located. I got a map. So you got the Carthaginian Empire. This is a map of the First Punic War era. And there it is. Right here. And so the Romans are sending ships over here, try to land some troops. There's a lot of fighting going on over here, I believe. And so, this is in the mid 3rd century BCE, or close to the mid 3rd century BCE for the First Punic War. This is about the same time we get the Septuagint, by the way. The earliest attested evidence of the Torah's existence was during this war, actually. So about that time, or depending on your dating of it, or maybe just before. I would say during, but whatever. So I think the Book of Kings had this situation in mind. I think that the author of Kings knew about this war, and this was polemic against the Carthaginians that was integrated into the Tanakh. And so I remember historians, they used to be skeptical of the Greco-Roman reports, polemic against the Carthaginians about child sacrifice. That is until they actually did the archaeological work in Carthage and they found the infants and the evidence that they were burnt alive. So they found the proof, and it's like, oh, okay, well, it's true. They were not lying about that. All right, so now we're going to get to the Mari archives. We're going to talk about the parallel between Ishkur and the God of the Bible in another way that I didn't get into in our previous session about this. That is, Ishkur is understood as a god who punishes governments, causes regime change, punishes governments that are not faithful enough to him, just like the God of the Bible. Just like with situations that we see in which God sometimes would get mad at David or Solomon, stuff like that. What we're seeing has happened in the Mari archives. This is from the 18th century BCE. So again, this is from Jack M. Sasson. That's where these images are pulled from. These are texts from his book, just to note that. All right, so we're going to go through this. I'll try to do this quickly. On the 7th day of my entering Halab, I told Yaramlim, may my Lord give me an answer so that I can leave. This is what I told him. I have heard the tablet for Yaramlim, but my Lord sent me. I gave precise account of my Lord's position as written on the tablet to Yaramlim and Aplahada of Carchemish. My Lord should hear their replies about the men once I gave Yaramlim a detailed account of my Lord's words. He answered me, Zimrilim has ousted his enemy, but now his requests are tough. When Sumupa, my father, feared God, he achieved his goal. No other king matched him. When he coveted that which Adu gave, Samsi Adu, my father, Sumuipa, did not enjoy old age because he attacked the land of that Adu gave Samsi Adu. Adu had him killed. As of now, however, Adu has not been angry at me. So Adu is a different form of Adad. So to talk about Ishkur, it's like being concerned about, is he angry at me? Am I making a mistake? So he's constantly being paranoid about that. So I'll keep going. This is what he answered me. At this second reply, he answered me, Zimrilim has clearly forgotten the lesson of Adu, to the point that Zimrilim might not realize that in Adu's territory, fugitives are not to be handed into custody. Else could he be writing the following: capture these men in your heartland. They must not stay. This is his second reply. The next day, he summoned me and told me, these kings are not now within my land. If they were in my land, I kept them from Zimrilim. May Adu, Lord of Halab, put Yarimlim to test. From now on, be it 1, 2, or even 10 years, should they enter into my land, I shall bind them and turn them back to Zimrilim. These kings are not within my realm. Dadmum. This is what he answered me. But I argued back, is the entire realm and Imar as well not yours, your land? Certainly, then my lord Yarmlim is withholding these men. This is what I told him. So he summoned the elders of Imar and gave them the following order. The Yemenite kings must not stay in Imar. Expel them. From now on, they must not remain here. Should these men try once more to enter Imar, Zimrilim, and I will war against you. This is what he said to them, and they answered, we will expel them. From now on, they can never enter Imar. This is what they answered him. Regarding Yaga Adu and Samsi Adu, who are now in Carchemish, and Aplahandu of Carchemish is coming to Halab, and matters will be resolved. I will send my Lord whatever news he gives me in answer. The third time, his answer, had these men been in my land, and I kept them from Zimrilim, right then and there, Zimrilim would have cause to be peeved at me. From now on, be it 1, 2, or even 10 years, should these men turn around and enter my land and my kingdom, I shall bind them and have them brought to Zimrilim. Should I not fulfill this promise to Zimrilim, may Adu, Lord of Halab, put Yarimlim to test. This is what he answered me. He wrote to Almudpila of Qatna as follows: Samsi Adu, Urabu leader, enemy of Zimrilim, is making his way towards you. You must expel this man from your land. He must not stay here. About Yagi Adu, Yaru leader. He took up the matter with Aplahanda in terms of instructions of my Lord, of which I reminded him. Having heard them from my lips one day or another, this man will cause you grief. Exactly what I have told Yarimlim. Yarimlim told him. Aplahanda answered him, a few lines missing. So you have Ishkur literally being portrayed. You have also people named after him too in the story. So you have a God, a personal God, literally involved in regime dispute, regime change. You see what I'm talking about? This is the kind of stuff we see with the God of the Bible. It's no different. And this is where Mari's located. This is, you have it here, Mari under Zimri Lim. So Mari's right here where my mouse is. You see it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so all this territory here pretty much belonged to Zimri Lim in the 18th century BCE when he was in control. And here's a couple of tablets from the Mari archive, so you get to see how they look like. Real quick, I'll leave it up for a second. But yeah, you see that I've gotten into more details about these parallels. And let's pile it up.
Yeah.
God that starts floods. God of the people that go in and out of Egypt, the Hyksos. God who was involved in taking a man to heaven. God who overthrew and killed the other gods till he was the last one standing as the son of Aphirad. Defeated a rebel god that tried to overthrow him after he took over. Kind of like Satan rebelled, or Lucifer rebelled against Yahweh and lost. Same story. He slays a serpent. Yahweh slays a serpent. Yahweh, Baal-Hadad defeats Yam. Yahweh defeats Yam too. Yahweh and Baal-Hadad both have the same wife, Anat. And I could keep going. They both participate in punishing regimes and regime change. Just like the God of the Bible. Same personality. And Hupaziah helped him. The mortal helped him bind the rebel. Then he gets punished by Inara because he disobeyed the one thing that he couldn't do was to look out to and see his family because he missed them. Just like Adam screwed up, broke the covenant, or did that thing in Genesis, ate the fruit when he wasn't supposed to, depending on how you look at it. You want to take Hosea's version as your preference or Genesis's version, whatever. But you see, it's a long, very long list of parallels. Some of these details I went over in our last stream. It's possible I missed a couple. So I was going over new details while also recapping on a lot of other details.
Right.
Ishkur is viewed as the son of Enlil. Yahweh was viewed as El's son. Ishkur slays the 70 sons of El and Aphirad. Yahweh is one of the 70 sons of El, and he defeats the so-called false gods. Ulukumi rebelled against Ishkur. Satanio rebels against God. Ishkur was a chief god of the Hyksos, a people that invaded Egypt and later left. Yahweh is credited with leading the Jews out of Egypt. Ishkur was referred to as Baal-Hadad. Yahweh was referred to by the title Baal at one point. See Hosea 2:16 or 2:18, depending on the version you read. Ishkur slays a serpent. Yahweh slays a serpent. Ishkur took Inmidranka to heaven. Yahweh took Enoch to heaven. Ishkur's wife Medemsa is in later text referred to as Anat, the consort of Baal-Hadad. Yahweh's wife is in the Elephantine Papyri is Anat Yahu. Ishkur rose out of the ground after 7 years. I probably could have worded that better because it has to do with Ishkur and his conflict with Mot in the 7th year. We talked about that earlier. Yahweh creates everything in 6 days of his sleeps on the 7th day. Ishkur is referred to as the one who rides the clouds. Yahweh is referred to as the one who rides the clouds, as is the Son of Man too. Ishkur is credited with causing floods. Yahweh is credited with causing floods. Hupazias disobeyed. Adam disobeyed. Commands and punishes nations. Commands and punishes nations.
I don't want to interrupt you, man. Yeah. So, yeah, I'm curious to get a vote just for the hell of it and get people's thoughts. But before we do, we did get a super chat that was giving a little pushback, but was saying thank you. So, Enduring Motifs, thank you for the 10. Love your guys' channel. If I can push back on History Valley's theory, shared epithets and stories doesn't mean same ontological identity. So the question I would want to pose in this to get your thoughts, Jacob, is that if you were lining these up, so you saw these parallels. At the end of the day, would you just say, look, they clearly have shared tropes, themes at best, but you really are convinced that this Ishkur deity is a genealogical descent or ancestor to the Yahweh that later shows up in the Bible. So even if there's elements borrowed from other regions, other places, you're not necessarily making the claim that it has to be ontologically identical, but that you have so much in common that you think
the list is too great. It's too
probable.
It's too great. There's too many. It's only become more similar since the last time we talked about this. It's no offense to this super chatter, but this is the same kind of logic that apologists try to do. And let's say a believer in Greek revivalism said, "My gods aren't plagiarized from Sumerian gods. Oh, Zeus and Enlil, they have a bunch of similarities. That doesn't mean they're the same. They're the same ontologically, really. So this wouldn't be a problem if it's a different god, but because it's Yahweh, we need to lose our cookies. No. I need to keep my uniqueness, and I see the same problem with secular scholars. You still have that bias seeping in, even though they are critical, and I don't deny that they are critical. They're not as critical as they should be when it comes to, we need to preserve Yahweh's uniqueness. You see my problem? They're trying to rescue an element of that. Say, okay, well, we can't rescue the stories. They'll admit the stories were plagiarized. So it's like, well, we'll fish for a name then that sounds like it, if that's the ticket.
Yeah, so I can't read enduring motifs, motivations, and what they are getting at. I guess the pushback, if I was taking it from a secular point of view, would simply be you're going to get shared overlaps and motifs and narratives and stuff like that. And that could easily be lifted and yet still have this local deity of a land that's in the northern region of Mesopotamia still remain that deity, and then just later lifting stories, narratives, and myths and tropes and whatnot and apply them to your deity. What really gets me thinking, or at least scratching my head, is when you start applying the Hyksos stuff. And when you think about the geography and these very Asiatic people who came from this region, went to Egypt, came back, I do wonder, how much of this really is ontological identity. Could it be a percentage of ontological identity? And then there's also other elements and things as it's going along.
So here's the problem. If I can, here's the issue that they have to overcome. And to be fair, do they all have that same agenda? No, I'm not claiming that everybody that disagrees with it has that same agenda where they have a little bit of apologetics going on. But I do think it's true, at least in some cases, that some people have that apologetic mindset. And so my point is, why this concentration? This is the problem when you look at when you look at the preponderance of the data. The faithful continuation of these stories about Ishkur. That's the problem that they have to overcome if they want to claim that this is some freak coincidence. Because that's just another way. That's pretty much what they're saying in another way. It's just some freak coincidence.
He's saying shared epithets and stories. So they are shared stories. He's just wondering if the God himself, like if we find, let's say you identified a particular Baal that isn't Yahweh, and you say, well, I don't think that's Yahweh, but we found him and he had, let's say, I don't know if we have these texts, but just pretend he also was a storm deity. He also rode on clouds. He also had 70 brothers. His father was named El or whatever. You wouldn't necessarily equate that with Yahweh ontologically, but you could say they have a shared motif and trope and whatnot. That's what he's trying to say. And by the way, the scholar that I brought up, Giovanni Garbini, that's mentioned in just the name thing, it's more than just a name. He's a son of El. And we know from Deuteronomy 32 that Yahweh is a son of El, right? So we look at that correlation and they're going, hey, he's a son of El, literally in the Baal cycle. And that's the kind of thing. He's not just saying it's just an epithet or theophoric name element of Yah, but that he is a son of the God named El, just like we find in Deuteronomy 32, and then goes from there. So he's not just throwing out like a linguistic thing. It's the combination of linguistic and he's a son that we find within the biblical
it's
text.
Still from the same sentence, though. So
What
it's still that Yah, son of El. It's from the same piece of evidence. It's not two separate pieces of evidence. And so my point that I'm trying to make is that's all he's got. There is no, as he admits, there is no narrative story behind this sound alike, other than
right.
Yah, son of El, sounds like Yahweh, son of El. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. That's my problem.
It's not the collection of evidence that you're pointing out. I see what you're saying.
That's correct. That's why I buy the critics and what they're saying that it's actually Yam, because that does
so you
sense.
Buy that's Yam.
I do.
Oh, okay.
I said that earlier. I do.
I didn't know that. Okay.
And I believe Niels Peter Lemke does too. So to me, that makes more sense. They just spelt his name differently, just like Milcom got misspelt in the Moloch and the Tanakh. That happens.
Interesting. So you think on the same clay tablet they respelled his name differently in a different place?
Yeah, that can happen.
Yeah. I don't know.
Like
I'm much more. I don't have a strong stance. I'd be much more cautious and going, I don't know. Garbini sounds like there's something to that. And the fact that a millennium later, the same deity is still in that same geographic location with that same name makes me go, he might be onto something here. So I'm more hesitant than you are on that in terms of drawing a line that must be Yam. Well, though I like to hear both sides. You know
just to be clear, that evidence about Yahweh being in that same territory is from much later evidence. If it were older evidence before that inscription, that would be different. But if it's later, it's not much help.
I mean, someone might say that about the Bible, though. When you're saying Yahweh is Ishkur, these stories traveled to the south, and a local deity picked up the narrative. That's why this guy right here, unless you could show Yahweh himself with that name in that land in the north, or older stories than Ishkur, that ties these two together. That's why this person's saying you can have shared epithets and stories. It doesn't demand that they're the same actual deity, and that later a story is picking up some of Ishkur's epithets or similarities. And that's why I'm wondering how much of this is the case, how much of its ontological identity, I don't know. But you can't deny the similarities. There's similarities, no doubt.
Yahweh shows up later, though, and what they have to rely on is sound alike only. And I'm not going to compare it to some other crap that I've heard before. But my point is, the thing is that here's what I think. I'm going to try to be careful the way I put it. And this could be happening with why Yam was changed to Yah. The Baal cycle is kind of, in certain cases, kind of inverting what you see happening in the Hittite and Hurrian stories that we were going over earlier. Remember I mentioned that Aya is an ally of Ishkur?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm getting at? And that is, it's kind of ironic that they spelt Yam as Yah, son of Il, or El, because you have an Ayah, so you have a Yah who assists Ishkur. So this leads back to Ishkur. And I don't think it's a coincidence that in some Jewish literature outside the Tanakh, you have a second power in heaven. And in later literature, like Third Enoch, you have the lesser Yahweh. Why is that? Well, you do have a Yah who is, in a sense, subordinated to Ishkur. So I'm still saying the same thing, but yet in another way. And it could be possible, this is as far as I'm willing to go, that Ishkur was renamed after his subordinate. Do you see my point? And I do think they borrowed his name, the name Yahweh, from something else. But that's to give Ishkur a new identity, a new life. That's what I think they did. And that's why I think that this evidence, they shouldn't get too excited about this evidence. This sounds like Yahweh. Because it doesn't surprise me that some other deity has a name that sounds like Yah. Big deal. That's where they got the idea from, to change this guy's name to Yahweh. And so what they're seeing as evidence that's contrary to my position is actually not contrary at all. It's just what gave them the idea to change his name.
Gotcha.
It's still the same God.
Okay.
So yes,
yeah, go ahead, finish what you're saying.
So it actually fits what I'm saying. That's my point.
Gotcha. Ludo, thank you. I think I said that properly. I'm not sure if it's an I or L. Thank you for the super chat. Sorry if this question has already been asked. Just joined the chat 2 minutes ago. Is it true that the Torah was inspired by the Hammurabi Codex?
I think partly because the stories of the laws of the Hammurabi Code definitely influenced Torah. And there's very good scholarship on that. I'm not going to get into all the details about it. But there's some very similar laws that you can look up. So I think there's some truth to that. You can head to the next one.
Yeah, there are definitely overlaps going on. And some scholars do think that in the law codes, there is borrowing from earlier law codes, such as Hammurabi. There are academics who do have written on this. I know that even Joshua Bowen has written on this, and I've heard him discuss this. That's one of the interesting things. And then you also got a super chat here. Thank you so much, Professor Chimp One.
Thank you
for the super chat. Does it contradict the Old Testament if Ishkur was a Sumerian record of the same God via oral plus written channels, later revealed with name Yahweh to the Israelites or Hyksos, anything indicating plagiarism?
Well, it's another way of saying the same thing, but I'm saying, but without. But basically, the question here is: are they the same God but in a different way? Because they're two different records of the same God, independently. I guess of one another. I don't think so, because then you'd have to postulate that the oral Torah is a hell of a lot older. I'm not even sure what to believe about an oral Torah. Like, how do you know what was said in oral tradition? That's the problem with any scholarship that has to do with orality. Unless it was something that was a lot more clear, like with the Homeric epics, when they can read the Homeric epics, they can tell it was oral tradition before it was actually written down. But with the Torah, it's not the same. We're not in the same boat here. I would say no. I think I'm going to stick with the way I've put it. That it's in modern vernacular, it's plagiarism.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would want to say is that plagiarism is this anachronistic idea we have.
I know I said modern vernacular for that reason.
Yeah. Just so people know, it wasn't stealing. It was common to borrow and share these traditions, cultural ideas,
shared inspiration.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no stealing. There's inspiration, and you can find why someone might be inspired by these stories. The only reason that works, I think, to use the term plagiarism or stealing or borrowing and all that, borrowing's not bad because that was common. But like plagiarism or stealing is that there is a sense, and I'm sure that Jacob relates to this, is that apologetics paints it like we have this unique story and it's usually nowhere else. And so when they do that, they get offended and defensive because their identity is so wrapped up in this that when you accuse biblical authors of borrowing ideas of mythologies prior, unless there's someone like very liberal Christian or a Catholic Christian that doesn't mind the Old Testament being, used this way, they will think that you're saying they stole the idea because then it's not original. So when it's not original to the biblical author in the sense that the inspiration is not top down from God directly to the pen of the author, and you're saying, hold on, he borrowed that from other humans, they feel like you're saying it's stolen from humans, and they feel you're stealing their story, which is that God inspired them directly and all of that. And so you might catch atheists say, oh, you plagiarized or you stole. And that's more polemic because the apologetic mindset that comes behind these texts. Whereas the accurate academic one is simply inspired, borrowed, influenced, And there are various ways in which they might say that influence happens. But it's worth addressing the plagiarism thing, because I did a recent video that was talking about they stole, the flood story stole from Mesopotamia. And then when I got to the beginning, I said, listen, what I mean by stole is think about what these apologists are saying. Anyway, another super chat. Iamblicus, good to see you. Thank you for the super chat. Is Mr. Berman working on a book containing these insights?
Yeah, I do want to. I do need to get that done. I just have to get through a few papers that I'm writing first, and then after that, there will be a book when this.
I can't imagine you're not going to write one. I mean, you've talked about this since we met. We met what, 8 years ago?
Back in 2019, I believe.
Okay, I thought it was before
7 years ago.
Okay.
You might have friended me back in 2018, but I can't remember for sure.
Oh, so you neglected my friendship until a year later. All right, I got it. Now we do go way back. So
yeah, we didn't. I don't remember all the circumstances, but we connected in more specifically in 2019. And that's when we did our first video together. God as a father.
Yeah, I see you now that you're writing articles and stuff. I can see you writing a book for sure, and giving your insights.
Yeah, this is a lot of information. It's a lot. It definitely has to be in a book. It's way too much for a paper.
Absolutely. Ricky Johnson 7591. Thank you so much for the super sticker, Ricky. That support is awesome. Really appreciate that. That's on your side, Jacob.
Oh, thank you, Ricky.
Yeah. Anti-Contrarian 3788, thank you so much for the super chat. Ishkur and the Fox myth, a possible nascent myth that led to dietary laws that later manifest in Judaism, as well as Jewish preferences to have heroes be mercurial rather than Apollonian. Huh.
Yeah. I don't think I have a problem with that. I think the Ishkur and the cow and the multicolored cows, they inspired Jewish narratives and Greek narratives simultaneously. Yeah.
Yeah. Something I need to dive. I mean, I haven't read these primary sources myself, or a lot of the books you've listed. Something I need to dive into myself.
It's kind of what I've implied earlier in a different way, because the Torah is like, no, don't mistreat cattle, don't kill them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like it's taking the flip side to what Hermes did. It's like Hermes stole Apollo's cattle. Like, stealing is bad. Don't steal cattle. Bad.
Yeah. Absolutely. Got another super duper in the hizzy. Matthew Mulkeen. Thank you so much for the support. I hope I didn't butcher your name too bad. That's on your side, Jacob. Adopted.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind I'm reading these. Is that okay with you?
Cool. No, it's great.
Yeah.
Continue.
Yeah, I figure I'd give you a break. I mean, you've been like going on and doing your whole series here. Adopted is also a good term rather than plagiarize. It's not pejorative. I agree. I think plagiarize does get, it's a good way to weaponize and polemic. It's just plagiarizing from this. And I think that's like an overstatement of simply saying, in the modern world, of course, if you brought your paper in and someone said, hey, check this out, what do you think about Atrahasis' epic? And then someone else came along and they're like, oh, what unique story did you bring? And then they're like, here's Noah's flood. And they're like, what the hell? Hold on, dude. You were looking at his paper. I know you were. Now, in a modern standard, yes, it would be plagiarism, according to, like you said earlier. But we are trying to explain to people that in that time, Genesis wasn't thinking what we're thinking today. So they weren't concerned about it.
Yeah.
Thank you again, Matthew, for the super chat, helping out my friend Jacob. Ricky Johnson in the house with another super sticker. And God, man, all these people are receiving free salvation right now. I mean, it's indulgence based, but still, how does it feel to be saved? I mean, every dollar counts towards a mansion that you get in the afterlife. I mean, no, seriously, thank you so much, Ricky. We really appreciate the support, everybody. It keeps the lights on, keeps us doing what we're doing and having fun.
Absolutely.
And experimenting with ideas like Jacob's doing today. Like, you've been chewing on this for a while, and you and I have had a lot of talks off record. And in fact, we recorded an episode on this in my old house. And we didn't feel like it was what we were able to do today. We didn't feel like it was as uniform as we wanted it to be. So we just put it on the back burner and said, hold on, let's cook up something that is going to make easier sense. Because even I was a little lost. Who are these characters? Like, what's going on with the names and all of that as we were talking in that interview. But this one, I think, turned out really well. And I think there's a lot of food for thought. I love that you paralleled at the end, giving people something to look at and go, huh. And I don't know if you saw my recent interview with Dr. Brian Doak. I said Doak again, Doak. I said Doak because in the introduction I butchered his last name. It's Doak, D-O-A-K.
Good to know.
And I brought up the whole parallelomania thing, and he says, no, we need to compare. Good. And even if you don't draw genetic, like, comparing is good, and we should do it. And he's like trying to encourage people to not feel afraid of trying to do comparisons, even if at the end of the day someone says, I'm just not fully on board with the whole total thing. There's so much there, though, Jacob. You can't deny. I think at the end of the day, me as someone who has to chew on stuff before I really, really say I'm convinced. I think you've convinced me there's some real overlap going on no matter what. And I'm sitting here scratching my head going, the Hyksos now with this whole idea of Ishkur, and like, I need to study this more, but you really got the wheels spinning. And for anyone watching, I think that just doing that, you've done your job. And I think that's important.
Well, thank you, Derek.
Of course.
I try.
Yeah, you are trying. Hey, look, you're kicking butt, man. Keep it up. But really appreciate that.
But one last thing I will say to close is, but it's true. The similarities are only mounting. There's way too many similarities between Ishkur and the God of the Bible. This needs to be looked into.
Okay.
It's massive. It's way too many similarities. No God parallels Yahweh like this. Not even close.
When you put your book project together, I'm sure by that time you'll have collected more material and try to find distinctive traits, distinctive characteristics. And in that case, it strengthens, right? It's like, they know about this tradition. It seems like it's influencing still. And the biblical authors are picking up on elements that have in common with Ishkur. Now, whether they're directly borrowing from the Ishkur story or an in-between that it's, downhill, right? That's already borrowing it. That's the fun part. Sure. I mean, for a lot of the scholars, but for us who are out here, like, not overly concerned about the direct antecedent, we see that overlap and go, it somehow made its way down. You know what I mean?
Right.
So anyways, this has been a blast on a Saturday. I hope we've committed enough heresy for everybody to enjoy. We got another super chat here.
All right.
Pluto, thank you again for the super chat. Do you believe the Bible was compiled for the purpose of controlling the masses by offering fictional stories to push forward an hidden agenda?
Well, what I will say is I do have a theory in the works. But I've talked about it publicly somewhat, so I will mention it. The Assyrian origin of the nation of Israel, and that's something that I'm working on right now. And I have talked about it with Derek behind the scenes. I decided not to talk about that today. That is one of the papers I'm working on because it also has to do with the 3rd century BCE composition of the Torah. I don't believe it was a hidden. I don't believe that there was a hidden agenda about controlling the masses. That's not what I think. But what I do think is, I think there was a deep crisis with the ancient Israelites, and ever since the Assyrian captivity, and in the 1st century BCE, they decided to they were already getting to that point even beforehand about forming their own identity. Mm-hmm. But by the 1st century BC, it's solidified. I'll leave it there about getting into the details because it is related to this discussion, and it can reveal potentially more parallels of Ishkur actually, but it's also a whole different topic that would take a long time to explain, which is why I'm not getting into it today.
Yeah, so there's a lot here. I want to grant that I do think that there are agendas by the authors. I don't know if they're intended to be hidden necessarily, but I think there's propaganda that the text is doing to, you know, downplay Northern kings. I mean, there's a lot of propaganda written by Southern authors, it seems, people who are later trying to envision the history of their nation um, through these stories that we find within the biblical text, and some later eventual redactor compiling a lot of this material together, some of it older, probably some of it ex nihilo during the Hellenistic period, I imagine. But I do think that they're at least consolidating their people group, their identity,
Yeah,
and they do think that one day God will bless them enough that they will rule, right, in some way. And how that plays out within particular authors, not all, maybe, but a lot of the prophets do have this vision. And I think a lot of people even have this idea about hell, right? They go, well, hell was invented as a mass controlling, fearful tactic to just control people. I think it was a tool that was used in that way, but it was not
sure.
exclusive to that. I think that humans really did think in the underworld, lava, volcanoes, gases with fire coming out of the ground, that there really was a place under there that was like a not good place and it was hot and it wasn't good. And so there was also this thing, like you just talked about, a crisis. Well, I would say the problem of evil that all humans deal with is this idea of suffering and justice. And a lot of people don't get it. So the rich douchebag down the road who owned all the property and literally abused all his people in the neighborhood, he lives this perfect life and dies later. And then the really good person who's poor and struggles and dies of starvation doesn't get rewarded. They can't imagine a just God, which they believe in, would allow that to go on and not him be rewarded and the other guy be punished. And so there's a sense in which your justice gets served in their brains through the belief in hell. But yes, it's also weaponized to control. And so your question is a little complex, I would say. It seems like it's only talking about the control nature. Sure, controlling is going to play a part in every cult and every religion, but I don't think that's the service, the purpose of the intent, as if it's only this thing. That's going to be a tool that's used, I'm sure, but I would say there's a lot more to it than that. If that makes sense. Do
Yeah,
you agree with me, Jacob?
I think I do. Yeah.
Thank
Although I will say
you.
maybe
Don't
a
agree with me?
slight,
No, I'm just kidding with
maybe one slight difference is I'll say I think they probably did get off on getting people scared. Like, yeah, I really want you to be afraid that you're going to go into the eternal fire unless
right.
you believe in Jesus.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
um,
sure.
yeah,
Yeah. That's why I said it's a little bit of, it's not
a little
either
bit both.
or. Right. There's going to be that. And there's some who are going to really see this tool works. So
Oh yeah,
someone might go, I don't buy that shit, but they still use it as a weapon to control people. Sure. But there are people who do believe in it. And yet still it does. They did a thing. Before we move to our next super chat, is Darren Brown, who's a mentalist, did a show converting atheists to believe in a God, not to become Christian necessarily, but to believe in a God. And in it, there's this episode part where he brings these people into a room, and he has two groups. It's really interesting. One group comes in the room, and he tells them, remember the little doctor thing that you used to go in and pick the organs out, and if you hit the side, it goes zzz, it buzz. You know what I'm talking about? The little game when we were young that you'd have to go in and try to pick the little organs out and try to be very careful with your hand not to hit the edges or it buzzes. And if it buzzes, you have to drop it back down until the next person gets to go. Anyone in the chat can help me with the name of this game. Anyway, there's these rings that you have to, that he was telling them to go around. And if it touches, they have to hit this buzzer that counts every time the ring hits the metal object that they're trying to get to the end on. The first group, he just takes them in there and says, hey, start doing it. Hey, I got to go. I'll be right back. Just hit the buzzer every time you do it. And the second group, before they started doing the buzzer thing, they said, hey, that chair over there, don't touch it. It's being auctioned tomorrow. There was a person who died in it, and their spirit literally sits in that chair. And sometimes the chair rocks. It's haunted. I don't know anything about it, but there's somebody in that chair, according to the people, and they're going to auction it tomorrow and blah, blah, blah. Then they tell them to do the rings. And then before they leave. They said, hey, I got to go to use the restroom. The camera's recording the whole time. The first group that they did not tell about the chair that's haunted, that something's watching them, they cheated. Every single person did not count every time they buzzed. The second group, the people who were doing the rings, counted every time they hit the buzzer. The psychology behind this is that they believed there might be someone in the room. Even though there's no one in the room, that chair in their brain, that there's something watching them, made them behave and not cheat. And so there may be some psychology behind this thing that I'm trying to describe about control and belief about punishment and doing good in life and not doing bad, or else you get the bad reward. Even if you make it up, people might behave better utilizing the tool of hell, or maybe you do it with mythology, right? And so it's a fun, interesting thing. If you haven't checked it out, it's free on YouTube. You can watch Darren Brown go through and show some interesting psychological ways of, all of that. Anyway, I rambled on long enough. M.R. Anderson, thank you so much for the super chat. Really appreciate the support. I like the Ishkur parallels to Yahweh that you bring up, but I will say Set's parallels are the most shocking. Keep up the great work, both of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Anderson. Yes, Set's parallels to Ishkur are by itself extremely strong, pointing to a common origin with Set and Yahweh. They're both different borrowings, different iterations of the same deity. Yes.
I think that's an interesting way that you triangulate that from Egypt called their god Set, right, for the Hyksos, and their god is actually Ishkur, where they are located. And we know that Set and Yahweh are constantly, seen as the same god. So it obviously depends on who's looking, but especially by the time you get to the Hellenistic period, you start seeing a lot of that in the writings. And you go, it's this triangle. I see a connection there. So thank you for the positive compliment, the super chat, and everything. Baron, 33 months they've had real salvation. Golly, I know you have real people saved that have become members of your channel too, Jacob.
Yeah.
Anti-Contrarian, thank you so much for the super chat. Coincidence that first law codes ever found instructions of Sharupak and first mentions the potential proto-Yahweh Ishkur found in the same place?
That's an interesting thought. It just shows you how old Ishkur worship is. It's very old. It goes back many thousands of years. Very old. He's a very old deity. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't know the instructions of Sharupak. I have not looked into these myself in depth. I've heard of them, but I have not read up on them. It is interesting too, though, that you brought this up at the beginning, that Ishkur's right there at Ararat, and this is the same geography we find the biblical flood narratives with Yahweh and whatnot too. So, food for thought. Like the wheels keep spinning.
It's just not. This is not the same kind of thing like you see with, say, Jesus and Odysseus. As Dennis McDonald points out, with the Homeric mimesis. This is something different. This isn't really mimesis. We're well beyond that. It is so much of a direct, faithful continuity of Ishkur worship. So specific, so carefully crafted, that's why I'm saying I think it's the same God, literally, because it's not like Jesus, he's sporadically imitating a bunch of different characters, like Dennis points out. This is something different, in which Yahweh is primarily just like Ishkur, and not so much like the other ones. That's the point that I'm making.
By the way, Operation was the game I was trying to identify. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of that game before.
Yeah, look, I could show you, but I'll take.
But yeah, I didn't have any of the instructions of Sharupak in my presentation. And honestly, this is something I'd have to look at a little bit more closely. It didn't occur to me to look at that with Ishkur, honestly.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I definitely never heard of this game before.
Yeah, this game right here. And if you touch the edges trying to go for any of the body parts that are in there, it buzzes. It goes zzz. But yeah, Darren Brown did a show. Darren Brown, it's on YouTube. Converts atheist. And he actually explains how he did it and why later. Very interesting. If you don't know who Darren Brown is, go on YouTube, check him out. Wicked smart. He does a lot of the whole cold reading stuff too, and shows he's even better than people who do that for a living. You know, the people who are like palm readers and they say they're communicating with the dead. This guy's really good. Anyway, what do you do with it? What do you do with it? Okay, hold up. We got a few more. Atomic Amanda, thank you so much for the super chat. Ever read The Egyptian Origin of the Ark of the Covenant by Scott B. Nogle? Nogle? Hope I'm saying that right. It compares Ark to Egyptian funeral barge of Osiris. Have you read that, Jacob?
No, I must admit I have not.
I am going to put that in my Amazon reading
Okay.
list.
By the way, it just hit me. The instructions of Shuropak, it was that Zeus Sudra flood story.
Okay.
It's not a separate thing.
I know that.
And I realized, that super chatter he wasn't specifying that Ishkur was mentioned in there, but it just mentioned from the same place that those instructions came from.
Gotcha.
It's true. Ishkur was a deity down there. He is a Sumerian. He is a Sumerian god. So, yeah, that's true. So, anyway, back to this super chatter. That never occurred to me to say that the Egyptian funerary barge of Osiris is the Ark of the Covenant. That's interesting. But speaking of the Ark, let's talk about Noah's Ark in the Egyptian context. Why don't you pull up some images of Nu, the Egyptian god?
Oh yeah, Egyptian
Nu. Yeah,
that's cool. There's like 8 of them on it, I think, or something.
Yeah, that's right. So you have this god that sounds like Noah, carrying the gods above the waters, so that way they don't drown in it. Because Nun is like a giant, supermassive god, so he can be over the waters and be okay. And that's what I think, anyway. And he's carrying that boat, lifting it into the sky, so that way they may live
above the waters. Like there, that's a better one. You could see the whole. It's hard to see it from here with everybody watching.
Yeah, but I can see it.
It's interesting too that you do see 7 characters plus the beetle. I don't know if that represents the 8th or whatnot, but we do know Noah's Ark has
8 people.
8 people. Yeah, 3 sons with 3 wives, and him and his wife. So that's 8. Here's like a remade kind of version of it. Yeah, interesting. So I looked up the book, though, The Egyptian Origin of the Ark of the Covenant. The Egyptian Origin of the Ark of the Covenant, and you said it's by who again? Scott B. Nogle. Scott B. Let me type this out. I was having a hard time getting it. Scott B. Noeg. Is it Noeg? Let me see. Noegel. Sorry about that.
No, you're fine.
I want to make sure I get it. And
oh yeah, of course.
Egyptian Books of the Dead. It doesn't say the name on Amazon. The book's not on Amazon.
Huh.
Yeah. I will keep it saved and I'll do some investigating online to see if I can't find it.
To me, where I'm at right now with this Ark business is I view the Ark of the Covenant as being kind of like a different spin on Noah's Ark. And you see there are thematic parallels between Noah's story and the Exodus story. You have Noah's Ark floating in the waters for 40 days and 40 nights. You have the Jews wandering the desert with Moses for 40 years. And you have arks involved in both situations. So I kind of view the Ark of the Covenant as being a literary duplication of Noah's Ark. That's what I currently think. I'm not totally certain of it, though. So on that one, I am open to changing my position if a different inspiration can be indicated. But until then, I think I'm just going to stick with that for now.
Atomic, thank you so much for that. If you possibly could email me, if you know a link that can help me find the source you're talking about, I'd really greatly appreciate it. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Go ahead. You're fine.
I was going to say my email is also listed in pretty much every video, and also in the about section. You can just reveal the email there, because somebody asked about emailing me earlier, so that's where my email is. You can go find it easily. Just look in the description.
Yeah, MythVision podcast.
Jacob Berman 553@gmail.com.
And I just put mine in the description. Yeah,
I'll do the same thing.
Absolutely.
That'll be easier.
So our next one is Enduring Motifs is back. Okay, here we go. The Yah elements in the Ugaritic text are best understood as part of the Yactul verbal name pattern common in West Semitic onomastics found in Mari, Ebla, and Ugaritic rather than a reference to Yahweh. That's typically what most of the scholars are saying. That's why I was saying. Yeah,
it's kind of what I was saying in a different way earlier, and that's the problem with the various Yahs. You have Anatolian Yah, you have the Egyptian Yah. I could keep going, and it's not the same deity. That's the problem, and it shows that it's a very weak position because all they have is a satellite. Whereas with me, I have Hosea admitting out the gate Yahweh was one of the balls of canon, and you've got the narrative is largely the same as the Ishkur story.
You do have a lot working for your position there that people should definitely consider. Really do. So thank you so much for giving pushback and of course defending. So he's giving you pushback, but then also coming and supporting what you were saying earlier. And again, I mean, I just should ask people to keep reading, hear the different sides, hear what scholars say about this, and listen to the debate. And this is something that I got some homework to do and keep studying on. Thank you so much, Enduring. All right, Jacob, we're going to wrap things here.
Yeah.
Any final words we should say before we close out?
Well, I'll just restate one thing, and that is the similarities are so overwhelming. I don't think it can be dismissed so easily as simply imitation. It's too much. It really is too much. I believe it's only going to pile even more.
Someone said, "Nah way."
The way that's typed makes me wonder if he was trying to make it sound like Yahweh.
It is. I think they are. No, seriously, thank you so much. It's been a blast. Let's do this again, Jacob, as usual.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on, Derek.
Of course. If you're watching from MythVision side, go subscribe to Jacob. He's doing all sorts of great work. I hope you will. Check out his scholarly interviews. He's got a ton of them. And we got to get these numbers to over 100,000. Get him a plaque. Let's do it together. Thanks so much, Jacob.
Thank you, Derek.
Have a good one.
You too.
Son, do you want to know what the truth is? After this, there's no turning back. You take the blue pill and you wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill and you stay in Wonderland, and I show you just how deep the rabbit hole goes. Remember, all I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.